They were going from Honolulu to Tokyo in December 1997, when suddenly and without warning, the plane dropped to 1,000 feet. One woman was killed, 47 people were injured, victims of clear air turbulence. Over the last 20 years, 3 passengers have been killed and thousands have been hurt by turbulence. It's the leading cause of injuries in the air. So far on our flight from Toronto, it's been smooth, and with any luck, it'll remain like this all the way to Frankfurt. We're just one of 500 or so flights up here tonight, flights carrying enough people to populate a small town. 125,000 passengers doing what has become ordinary, nothing unusual, simply flying overnight between North America and Europe. But the truth is it isn't ordinary, and it isn't simple. It's enormously complicated. Each flight a modern wonder of technology, interwoven with remarkable human endeavor. A drama played out 500 times a night, and we, as typical passengers, small players in this drama, have no real grasp of the scope of people and science that's got us this far and will stay with us until we're on the ground. So that's what we're going to examine tonight, as we stay in the air from Toronto, Canada to Frankfurt, Germany, on just another ordinary flight, Flight 876.
Scanning 904 again.
Peak traffic we're doing is about 1,000 aircraft a day.
US 026, ready back correct tonight.
The busiest hour will hit about 110 an hour.
They got an L1011 with 197 passengers on board. Last in position, 4430 north.
Well, the jet stream has a massive impact.
Sometimes they can reach up to 200 knots or higher.
It can make a difference of an hour easily.
Fatigue isn't a pure concept. There may be various reasons why they start making mistakes, but they do start making mistakes.
Okay, regional 1630, turn left heading 080. Left 080, level 7000, regional 1630. Canada 876, level flight level 330.
Canada 876, okay, call Montreal 13497.
3497, good night here, Canada 876.
Okay.
There are 200 of us who got on this plane tonight, just another load of bored passengers on one of the world's 50,000 daily commercial flights. We're being flown by veteran pilot Jim Guild and First Officer Chris Granley, but as nice and photogenic as these two Canadians are, they're simply the tip of the technological iceberg, and it's a big iceberg. Just by buying an airline ticket, we gained entry to a vast and complicated process, a virtual army of skills and machinery working to get this plane safely in the air. We became the personal responsibility of a regiment of dispatchers and planners and technicians who would take us up into the North American night and shepherd us into a European morning.
Air Canada 876, maintain 3, stay with me, clear takeoff 2 for left. 3000, stay with you, takeoff 2 for left, Canada 876.
So now we are among the 50 million people who crisscross the skies over the North Atlantic every year. 50 million passengers, and probably not one of us has any real idea of how we get from one side to the other. And the 200 of us on Flight 876 are also blissfully oblivious to how close we came to not getting off at all. For back in Toronto, all flights at Pearson International Airport have been suddenly grounded.
They're holding departures right now.
So far, well, 856 is still on the ground here in Toronto.
Yes, did they have a bit of emergency in Toronto there or something that's what's holding things up?
According to the report, the emergency report, his Nose gear warning light indicated that his nose gear was not down and locked. We plan on things operating smoothly and as best we can.
Okay, we check.
And something like this, you can't plan for.
Waiting on the gate.
Although the emergency has happened on another airline, it could affect every flight in Toronto. Dan Meakin, the man who came up with our flight plan, now has all his other Air Canada flights on hold, and flight dispatchers don't like that.
What it'll do here is if we get what have we got, 7:30, 7 o'clock departures, there's a lot of departures at 7 o'clock. Something like this could really mess up the departure profiles and everything. Because we've been taking off on 24 right, the far side of the field. Those takeoffs have probably been delayed till this fella comes in. So that could, back things up. We're lucky we got 876 out before that.
The emergency turned out to be a faulty light in the cockpit, and life at Pearson quickly returns to normal, if dealing with aircraft taking off and landing every 40 seconds can never be normal. All aircraft going over the ocean fly in single-file and organized pipelines, defined by air traffic controllers, sort of like joining a huge conveyor belt. But if too many aircraft want to get on the same belt at the same time, it has the potential for congestion, and they don't like that either.
This is for 842. I just cleared the flight, and Montreal Centre has sent out restrictions for the overfly of Montreal airspace. Normally we don't have North Atlantic routes this far north. So what's happened is that having these routes that far north, we're getting a lot of traffic from the central part of the United States, more than likely, using these tracks here. Well, I'm using it as well. So you got a lot of traffic feeding across Montreal Centre, more so than normal, so they probably don't have enough people staffed to run the full operation up there. Secondly, there'll be probably some in-trail restrictions, so there'll be only so many people can go on those routes at a time. Now, you could have capacity of, say, I don't know, 10 an hour. There could be 20 people wanting to do the same route at the same time. So they're having to reroute and slow things down.
Simply by being understaffed, the Montreal Area Control Centre could end up costing the airline thousands of extra dollars in rerouting their aircraft. Although based in Toronto, Dan Meakin and his colleagues organised departures on flights right across the country, and this new development means a whole lot of extra work, which doesn't exactly improve their naturally jovial disposition.
Now what about the rest of them? They're all going the same way.
Well, we're stuck on all of them. So if you need a hand, tell me.
So they want us to refile?
Yep.
All right.
I was actually planning them right through here and then down in, but now we have this, I'm not allowed to do that. Just take a look at it and start from scratch here and see how much it's going to cost me to come down further south and bring them in. We're about a minute late right now, and plus 3.7 on the gas using the low one.
Alrighty, thank you.
On Flight 876, we are well south of the affected area, but our traffic problems are a long way from over. As we get closer to the eastern seaboard, we'll have to get in line with the 500 or so other flights anxious to get into the pipeline to Europe. Missing our reservation could add time and money to Flight 876.
Embla, expect flight level 330, Mach decimal 74.
Boston, good evening. It's Air Canada 876 Heavy, flight level 330.
Air Canada 876, Boston Center, roger.
Since leaving Toronto, Air Canada Flight 876 has been following its flight plan east over New York State and into Quebec. Passing south of the St. Lawrence River, we're now being monitored by air traffic controllers in Boston. Pretty soon we'll be boarding a sort of virtual on-ramp to the transatlantic highway at a point known as Raffin. But first, we need to contact the oceanic planners at Gander. These are the traffic cops of the North Atlantic tracks.
Delta 148 clearance.
Think of the tracks as an airborne highway system being rebuilt about every 12 hours to take advantage of the powerful easterly winds. Most nights, there are at least 5 different tracks ranging in altitude from 31 to 39,000 feet. Each entry into these tracks is at a fixed latitude and longitude coordinate, so everyone knows where to get on and where to get off. While on the same track, aircraft are kept 10 minutes apart, about 80 miles. It sounds like a lot, but on Flight 876 we gobble up 8 miles every minute. Our nearest neighbouring tracks are 60 miles away on either side, and there's 1,000 feet of airspace both above and below us.
Getting clearance from CDM.
These separation regulations over the ocean are more than 10 times what they are over land. While under radar control, planes at the same altitude can be as close as 5 miles to each other. But when we get 200 miles over the ocean, we and all the other planes in the sky disappear from radar.
876, contact the Moncton Center now, 132.7, good night.
32.7, Air Kennedy 876, good night.
Added to that, our VHF radios, which have kept us in contact with air traffic controllers since we left Toronto, also don't work over the ocean, and we'll have to rely on more primitive, high-frequency bands.
Air Canada 876 Heavy, Moncton Center, roger.
This combination of no radar and poor radio explains why oceanic planners want a lot of space between aircraft. The planners will be relying on us, and every other aircraft over the ocean, to maintain speed, altitude and direction, and give periodic reports confirming where we are in the track. This way they can make sure we're not cutting into anyone else's lane, and we're keeping our proper distance from the planes ahead and behind us. To do that, we'll be relying on our inertial reference system to tell us where we are. An inertial reference system costs $250,000, and if you want to get on the North Atlantic tracks, you need at least 2 on board. Even before a European-bound plane takes off, the Inertial Reference System, IRS, is programmed with specific coordinates from their exact point of departure. The IRS uses these coordinates as a base, monitoring the plane's movements right from the departure gate to calculate where we are at any given time. The key component of the IRS is what's called a ring laser gyro. This works by splitting a laser beam in 2. The beams are sent around a tiny chamber, each beam traveling an equal distance. Where they meet up again, they create a wave. Any movement of the chamber means that for a tiny instant, one beam will have a slightly longer journey and the other a slightly shorter one. Now when they collide, the frequency of the wave changes, and those infinitesimal variations can be converted to record the change in position of the aircraft. Over the ocean, the technology isn't pinpoint accurate, but normally can tell us where we are within a football field or so. On a trip like ours, their calculations can be off as much as a mile for every hour of flight. But once we're within 200 miles of shore, the inertial reference system automatically rechecks its position with the ground-based aids, and within seconds, corrects itself. Over the ocean, even if 2 aircraft were to veer slightly off course, the 60-mile separation provides a huge margin of error. Now you know why the transatlantic tracks are so wide, and can be suitably grateful they planned it that way. Each track is given an alphabetical identifier. Tonight, ours will be T for Tango. And although Gander received the flight plan hours before we left Toronto, Flight 876 still needs reconfirmation and clearance before we can fly over the ocean.
Gander, good evening, Air Canada 876.
We're still about an hour west of Gander, but it's important that we contact them as soon as we can.
Gander, Air Canada 876.
Every other aircraft crossing tonight is also trying to confirm its place, which is why, as Chris Mullen, the shift manager, can testify, Gander, Newfoundland becomes a popular place around this time every night.
We're doing, in terms of overhead movements, about 1,000 aircraft a day. That traffic actually moves through our airspace in about 10 to 12 hours. Our hourly peaks, the busiest hour will hit about 110 an hour.
Scanning 904, say mode estimate and your data link readback.
He's already been cleared, so I'll just tell him expect 39.
These planners are playing a high-stakes game of three-dimensional dominoes, constantly juggling little flight strips. Each strip represents an aircraft traveling at 500 miles an hour at a specific height. This is how they put them in order to go over the ocean. Each aircraft with a flight plan, a schedule, and a load of passengers to deliver, all there on a little piece of wood.
The rules of the game are very simple. We deal with aircraft on a first-come, first-served basis. We look at efficiencies, of course. If one aircraft may penalize many aircraft, that might be the aircraft we may have to move. But generally speaking, it's first-come, first-served. We give preference to an aircraft that may be already at an altitude, as opposed to an aircraft that might be flight planning into that altitude. So the rules are very, very simple. If an aircraft gets there first, usually he gets what he's looking for.
Hey, Gander, good evening. It's Air Canada 876.
Air Canada 876, good evening. Say your estimate for RASM. If you have your data link, go ahead to read back.
One of the first items that they ask for is what is the time estimate that you're showing currently in your flight management computer? What is the time estimate that you're showing over the entry point to that particular oceanic track that you're going to be following?
Air Canada 876, we're estimating RAFN at 0153. We're clear to Frankfurt via track Tango. Flight level 330. And it's a track message of 271.
Air Canada 876, readback is correct. Return to control now, good night.
Air Canada 876 in the sequence 28037, good night.
It's quite crucial that you make your estimate. Even a minute is critical because eastbound usually that's about 8 nautical miles in 1 minute. So they like you to be very accurate with that time.
We now have a firm time on the Air Canada. So what the planner will do is he'll slot that aircraft into the altitude that he's requesting. He's also then going to reserve a profile in our flight data processing system. And once he actually plans the traffic, and the machine will do a conflict prediction against any other aircraft in the system at the time. The aircraft fits at the profile that he's requesting. The speed is okay, the route is okay, the altitude is okay. He's competing with a lot of other aircraft. There are about 400 flights going to go through there tonight. We try to get them as close to their optimum profiles as we can, but they don't always get it.
The tracks are designed to take advantage of the easterly winds, but the spacing between the tracks is so wide that not everyone will reap the benefit. Each flight plan tries to take advantage of these winds, and we're all chasing the best one. A push from that, and it's a superhighway to Europe. But if we don't get on it, it'll be like taking the back roads. A commercial jet traveling this high will meet winds that aren't exactly the gentle breezes we know on the ground, or even on top of a downtown skyscraper. For an explanation, we went up in the world with meteorologist Dan Ristic.
Wind speeds at the surface are affected very much by friction, and as you leave the ground, wind speeds tend to increase initially because you're moving the effect of friction. And then after that, they tend in an air mass to stabilize. If you happen to be near frontal systems, due to the effect of the difference in densities between air masses that are warm and cold, winds will near the frontal system continue to increase with height up to about 35,000 feet, and they can increase to speeds in the order of about 150 to 200 knots, and we refer to that as a jet stream.
Guys who like weather obviously get a lot more excited about winds than the rest of us. But basically, up here where there's nothing to hinder them, the winds that create the jet stream are moving at hurricane speed.
You'll generally want to be in the jet stream to pick up that wind. It can make a difference of an hour easily, sometimes more, over the total time, because quite often you can be just below a jet stream and be 100 knots less speed in a matter of a few thousand feet.
They can be thousands of nautical miles long, and at times they can be seen all the way around the globe. In terms of horizontal width, jet streams can be about the width of the distance, say, between Toronto and Detroit. At the same time, in terms of thickness, it could be 3 to 5,000 to 10,000 feet thick. To give you a frame of reference, the building behind us is about 800 feet thick, so put about 10 of them, one on top of the other, and the core of the jet stream could be that thick, but generally it's a little bit less, maybe about 5 of these buildings behind us.
The jet stream is one of those mystical sciences, though. You can have all the forecasts you want in the world, and it's going to be about there, but it isn't going to be there.
Pinpointing the location of jet streams is still not an exact science, but we've come a long way from the days of just having weather balloons. Satellite images and reports from pilots in the air help meteorologists predict its behavior. Because although the jet stream can be a pilot's best friend, it can also be a dangerous enemy. Jeff Coulson keeps an eye on the jet stream for Environment Canada.
What we're looking at here is a water vapor satellite image. This is from the GOES satellite, which sits 35,000 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. It stays in the same place always with the Earth in our rotation, so it's always taking imagery of the same geography. The channel we're looking at is called water vapor imagery. The water vapor is the white tones that you see on here. It indicates the amount of moisture in the upper atmosphere that's present. The darker shades indicate drier areas in the atmosphere. And what water vapor helps us to do, it acts as a tracer, basically, for us to follow the large-scale flows of the upper atmosphere and to find jet streams, which are very important in diagnosing upper-level clear air turbulence.
Going to get an overspeed. Well, there you go. That's the bumps. Okay, I'm gonna. What if we do it on spec? Yeah.
We talk about clear air turbulence being caused by wind shears, basically. Winds changing with height very dramatically in a very thin layer of the atmosphere. So the aircraft is encountering a certain wind as it's flying along, and suddenly that wind changes very dramatically. What was a crosswind becomes a headwind, becomes a tailwind, what have you, and each of those affects the way the aircraft responds. And in the most severe cases where the winds are changing very dramatically in a very short span, either vertically or horizontally, you're getting a lot of pitching and yawing of the aircraft and discomfort by the passengers, moved around in their seats, and in the most severe cases, actually being thrown up and hitting their heads on the ceiling of the aircraft.
The weather people, using the information from the pilots and the satellites, can plot two-dimensional maps showing the most likely path of the jet stream. But what pilots worry about most are things called jet streaks. These are bands of fast-moving air traveling inside the jet stream. They can be 50 to 100 miles long, and when an aircraft hits one, they can be very dangerous. Predicting the size and location of these jet streaks, you'll be happy to know, is what meteorologists are now working on with some enthusiasm.
The upper flow, the jet stream, where those strongest winds are at any given time is a constantly shifting situation. So what we're trying to do then is not only get a handle on where the jet stream is right now, but how that jet stream is changing with time. Animations with the contouring of where the strongest winds are in a color-coded way that's very easy to use for the human eye, where colors will jump out at them to say these are where the stronger winds are. Those products we're able to do right now. Doing that same thing then in 4 dimensions, where we have the 3 dimensions of space, and then taking it through into the future with time, we're working on that now, and that we do have that capability, but trying to get that down into the user community so that they're familiar with that product, that's, I guess, the stage we're in now.
As quickly as this little bit of turbulence hits us, it's gone. But we never really know when it might hit again. And now we're just about to enter track Tango at the waypoint known as Raffin. Pretty soon we'll be lost to radar as we disappear into a void across the North Atlantic. Maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all.
And Gander, Air Canada 876 position.
At 876, center, go ahead.
876 position, Raffin 0153, flight level 330. We estimate 45 north, 050 west, 0201. Next to be 47.
Although we appear to be alone up here, high above the North Atlantic is actually a very busy place. We're just one of those 500 planes flying to Europe tonight. But if something should go wrong, there's nothing any of those planes could do for us.
12237, good night, Air Canada 876.
The responsibility for aiding aircraft in trouble in the western half of the North Atlantic lies here, at the Rescue Coordination Centre in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The responsibility of the Canadian military, they cover 5 million square kilometres, and the thing they fear most is an emergency involving a transatlantic flight. Michel Brisebois is officer in charge of the Rescue Coordination Centre.
It's a 24/7 operation, 365 days of the year. There is no break in this business.
You got an L1011 with 197 passengers on board.
The centre can call on 2 separate squads of search and rescue technicians based at Gander, Newfoundland and Greenwood, Nova Scotia. They train constantly and constantly hope they never have to deal with the real thing, for these are the people who'll be the first to respond to a call.
RCC tasks us for an expanding square 1503.
Their reaction is immediate, as safe as possible, but as quick as possible, get to the squadron, get airborne, and proceed to site.
I'll open and pin the lower Dutch door. Whereabouts agent here I can. Help the passengers out.
Should a plane go down, the most difficult task these searchers will face is actually finding the crash site, and then trying to predict where any survivors might be in relation to that.
Now, smoke is away. Smoke is in the water.
In the past, it was simply trial and error, but now they use data from buoys designed to mimic life rafts caught up in the ocean currents.
It goes into the water, and there's a little inflatable bag that pops on top of it, and it floats on top of the water. And it transmits its position through satellite every 90 seconds. And we capture this data, and as it travels, it provides vectors and distance. Therefore, we can calculate a trajectory and the speed at which it travels. It speeds up our search efforts, and it's very important for us.
For the most part, a transatlantic crash is unthinkable. But on the night of September 2nd, 1998, the unthinkable happened here, and these men and women were called into action. At 9 o'clock that night, Swiss Air Flight 111 notified air traffic controllers in Moncton, New Brunswick, that they had smoke in the cockpit. Minutes later, the pilots declared a full emergency and requested an immediate landing. That was the last anyone heard from Flight 111. They disappeared from radar over the ocean about 35 miles from Halifax. In the little tourist town of Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia, rescue crews lined up to help the injured. But there would be no injured. As dawn broke, the scale of the disaster became obvious. Heartbreaking wreckage strewn over 10 kilometers.
Divers on the surface, stand by and coordinate.
When the cockpit voice recorder from the flight was recovered, its contents sent a chill through the aviation community. There were reports that the pilot of the doomed aircraft had consistently refused to accept improvised emergency landing suggestions from the first officer, preferring instead to fly strictly by the book. For the people who make their living in the air, the newspaper reports highlighted the importance of being able to combine flying capabilities with the skills needed for proper human interaction. The tragedy made them reevaluate just what the proper combination of those different skills really was.
My personal preference is a 50-50 split. A person has to have good technical skills, of course, to manage the systems and fly one of these aircraft. But you also must have a good human factor side to you also. You must be able to communicate well.
It's out for now. It's probably far more important as a crew that you be able to have some pretty good people skills to be able to operate, maybe even with someone you don't necessarily like at that time, but you know how to handle each other.
On Flight 876, we are now out of radar range and switching to the high-frequency radio to contact the flight service specialist back in Gander.
Gander, good evening. Air Canada 876 request.
50 West, calling 127.9, Gander.
0243.
They'll take our position reports and relay them to the oceanic planners so they can maintain proper separation on the tracks.
Fuel 62.9er, over.
Say you're next up for 50 West, and you're next after that. Go ahead.
The problem is that these radio frequencies are jammed, with the aircraft all trying to report their positions.
Gander radio. Break the station, calling Gander radio. Austrian 502, Gander radio, stand by. Go ahead, Sean.
If a controller in Gander needed to contact us directly, it would be difficult to pick up with all this traffic, so he could signal us on our selective call device, a cell call. Each aircraft has been assigned an individual calling code, and Gander can reach us using that code, setting off an audio and visual alert in the cockpit. All we're trying to do now is test the cell call, but as usual, the static is not making it easy.
Go ahead now. Roger, Continental 84 is 47 north, 30 west at 0154, flight level 350. Estimating 49 north, 20 west, 023.
The high frequency or the HF radios have been around for a long time, so there's a lot of history involved, and they know that they work. A passenger in an airplane can go back in the back and make a satellite phone call almost any time. That's available to me if I really needed it, but we generally don't do that unless we had a problem with the radios in the airplane. The satellite communications is being trialed and tested, but you also got to think how many countries there are in the world, and they all have their own sets of regulations. They all have their own, hierarchies of politics that have to be involved, and to get everybody on side and communicating and cooperating to implement a new procedure takes quite a bit of time.
Gander, Air Canada 876 request.
Air Canada 876, Gander, ready to go ahead.
Air Canada 876 request cell call check on Charlie, Quebec, Kilo, Romeo.
Air Canada 876, Charlie, Quebec, Kilo, Romeo.
Cell call checks, Air Canada 876.
Canada, Lufthansa 419er, full position, Gander. Lufthansa 419er, 4.
Oof, nice to get that shot off.
Once we've established contact, calls will be made on the radio about every 45 minutes to report our position. Flying now becomes routine, and getting us across the North Atlantic is now up to this remarkable aircraft. Since they were introduced in 1982, Boeing 767s have carried more than 900 million passengers. 900 million. The plane is a modern marvel. The paint alone weighs 180 kilos. There are 187 kilometers of electrical wiring. There are 3,140,000 different parts. But none of them, right now, are as important as the engines. In the middle of a transatlantic flight, there is somehow nothing more comforting than the sound of the engines. On a 767, each of these little powerhouses can deliver 50,000 pounds of thrust, and as long as there's fuel, they can run forever. Here's how they work. A large fan at the front of the engine draws in air and forces it backwards through another series of fans, where some of it's compressed and forced through a narrow chamber, sort of like whistling faster and faster. This fast-moving compressed air is mixed with the fuel and ignited, forcing it backwards at an even faster rate. Now here's the tricky bit. The exhaust gases are forced out through a final set of turbines. These turbines are connected to the compressor fan at the front, and as long as the engine is running, it's the turbines that actually runs the fan. So the whole thing is designed to be almost self-perpetuating, as long as there's fuel to keep it going. We've been in track Tango for 800 kilometers, burned 17,000 kilos of fuel. The actual flying of the plane is now being handled by the autopilot, with input coming from the flight management computer. The 767 relies on 140 microprocessors and computers, and 2 pilots, with not very much to do.
People come up to the cockpit all the time and say, "Aren't you bored?" And we just say, "Boring is good," because that's the way it's supposed to be for you in the back.
When people visit the flight deck, it may appear that things are pretty relaxed and there's not much going on up there, but if you take a close look at the eyes on the 2 fellas up there, you'll notice that the eyes are constantly moving over all of the instrumentation, the various glass instruments and whatnot.
Automation primarily is trying to take duties away from the pilot to allow him to have the time to sit back and monitor a whole range of other functions of what's going on in the aircraft, which maybe didn't have as much time available in the past to do that.
We've now reached the halfway point across the Atlantic. The North American control of our journey is now over, and 876 is about to be taken over by traffic controllers in Prestwick, Scotland. The Army of Technology is still with us. It's just that the accent is about to change.
Alpha Golf Hotel Romeo.
Shamrock 105, Shannon, roger that.
We're more than halfway across the ocean and starting to contact radio operators in Shannon, Ireland. They will relay messages between Flight 876 and the oceanic planners in Prestwick on the west coast of Scotland. In the cockpit, they refer to the combination as Shanwick.
Shamwick, Air Canada 876 position.
Air Canada 876, Shamwick, good morning.
Morning, Air Canada 876 position, 49er north, 030 west, 0340, flight level 330, estimate 51 north, 20 west, 0424, next 52 north, 15 west, fuel 23.3, and that's copied again to Air Canada 876, cell call Charlie, Quebec, Kilo, Romeo.
Air Canada 876, Shamwick, your position is copied out, okay. Your backup frequency is 2971.
From here we will continue and track Tango to the northeast until we get to a point just off the coast of Ireland known as Dollip. Unfortunate name, don't you think? Just as Raffin was where we got on the track to cross the Atlantic, Dollip is where we get off. This is our exit ramp. From here, domestic air traffic controllers will begin to shepherd us across the United Kingdom and into Germany. By the time we land, passengers will have crossed through 7 different time zones. So will the pilots.
Time zone travel is a problem for everybody, and everybody reacts differently to it. So what would be a solution to manage that problem for one individual may not work for another?
Fatigue is an issue. You are tired, and you've been up all night, and there's really been no way around it. I generally have no problems until about 5 o'clock in the morning. And then you tend to hit it, myself, I hit a bit of a low point. And I'm not a coffee drinker, but I'll drink coffee then.
All right, guys. We're going to be abrading your scalp very gently
These Canadian military flyers are being kept awake all night in a medical lab in Toronto, where they're taking part in a study of pilot fatigue. They're being asked to fly a laptop simulator program while having measurements taken on their EEG levels. As the evening wears on, not surprisingly, the performance declines. And it seems this decline may be preceded by a change in brain activity. Professor Hal Weinberg is one of the leading scientists studying fatigue and knows what happens when pilots get tired.
There may be various reasons why they start making mistakes, but they do start making mistakes in the sense that it takes them longer to figure out what it is that they have to do. It's not that, in a sense, they make mistakes that are dangerous, but they begin to have difficulty in sort of keeping it all together.
Okay, guys. The study is trying to develop a personal index which will tell pilots objectively when their individual performance is about to be negatively affected by fatigue. It'll also try and determine which countermeasures work specifically for them, whether it's coffee or stretching or taking a nap. The problem with studying fatigue is that no two people react exactly the same way.
And fatigue isn't a sort of pure concept that's extracted from everything else that's happening to the individual. Somebody might be having trouble at home, their kids might be driving them crazy, and that's all superimposed. So there's a combination of things that are always going on in somebody's head that produces this capability of the individual to fly. And when you try to measure whether or not that capability is maximized, you don't know really what all of these factors are that are actually leading to this change, but you can measure the change.
Shannon, good morning, Air Canada 876 position.
Air Canada 876, disregard the report, squawk 2737.
2737, Air Canada 876.
Air Canada 876 identified, cleared to Frankfurt, direct to Cork, Upper Lima 607, maintain flight level 350.
And so with no fanfare, Flight 876 has left the North Atlantic tracks and is welcomed into Irish airspace. With the comforting knowledge that our pilots are tired and that tired people make mistakes, it's time to enter the most dangerous stages of the flight and prepare for landing in Frankfurt, the continent's busiest airport.
247, 247, good day.
The tidal wave of traffic crossing the North Atlantic is starting to reach landfall in Europe and be directed to their various destinations. Air Canada 876 is just one of a convoy of jets about to snake through European airspace. We've been aloft for just over 6 hours, travelled 5,000 kilometres and burned 35,000 kilos of fuel. The people in North America who played such a part in getting us here have forgotten about us. We're just another successful flight. And now we're about to enter the lives of traffic controllers who manage the world's most congested airspace.
Air Canada 876, contact London 133.6, bye-bye.
London, good morning, Air Canada 876 Heavy, flight level 370. Air Canada 876 London, good morning, your routing is Upper Lima 607, Upper Gulf 1 to Frankfurt.
European airspace is a patchwork of different rules, regulations and technology, which is already stretched to the limit to accommodate a seemingly insatiable demand for flight. Basically, we're about to enter an aerial traffic jam. Flight 876 has picked up some time. We're now about 10 minutes early. But being early here is no better than being late, because it's so jammed that each arriving aircraft is already slotted into its predestined time.
Instead of 30 an hour, we've got 35.
And on top of that, they're now saying that the weather is not looking good.
They have a front moving in toward Frankfurt, bringing with it thunderstorms.
If we're going to be delayed, our 75 passengers with connections might have a few problems. The flight might also be late getting serviced and may be delayed for the trip back. But right now, heading into these thunderstorms, most of us wouldn't mind if the plane was a bit late.
Anything else, sweetie? You okay?
As long as we could get it on the ground. But we, on Flight 876, are still up in the air.
Turkish 1587, winds 180, 10 knots.
Although by world standards it's relatively small, Frankfurt is the busiest airport on the European continent. 1,100 aircraft taking off and landing every day. 44 million passengers a year. To make it work, they follow a very strict business plan, promising airlines that passengers and baggage landing in Frankfurt can be on board a connecting flight within 45 minutes. It puts a lot of pressure on everyone involved, but their efficiency is important to their future, because as European airspace gets busier and more crowded, airports like Frankfurt will be fighting for business and will have to prove they can handle the crowds. But for the moment, we are not too concerned with the business of airports. We're busy with the business of landing. We're preparing to touch down on a European tarmac as soon as they can fit us in. Flight 876 is almost over. Almost. In Frankfurt.